Okay, we're back. Thank you so much for joining. I'm very excited to welcome in our next keynote speaker here. And I think you're going to really enjoy this one. So Dr. Oren Etzioni is Chief Executive Officer at the AIlen Institute for AI. He is Professor Emeritus, University of Washington as of October 2020, and a venture partner at the Madrona Venture Group since 2000, actually from the 2000. His awards include Seattle's Geek of the Year in 2013, and he has founded or co-founded several companies, including Farecast, acquired by Microsoft. He's written over 100 technical papers, as well as commentary on AI for the New York Times, Wired, and Nature. He helped to pioneer metasearch, online comparison shopping, machine reading, and open information extraction. And I could say he's one of the people that I really look towards. I always look forward to the announcements coming out from his social media, from the work that he's done, as well as the AIlen Institute as a really amazing institution that has really given us some great contributions. So it's my pleasure to welcome Oren. And Oren, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for the invitation for what looks to be a simply tremendous conference. And also, thank you for this very kind and elegant way of saying how old I am. With that, we have limited time. Let's jump right in. And I want to start with the fact, right? We have a lot of technical talks in the session today and beyond. But I want to start with the fact that for a lot of people outside the AI community, AI evokes fear. And you have folks like Elon Musk saying, with AI, we're summoning the demon, religious imagery. And he doesn't just say that on places like Twitter. He met with the governors of all the states in the United States and made this point. And so we have smart people like Elon Musk. We have people inside the AI community, like textbook author Stuart Russell from Berkeley and others, making the same point that AI could potentially spell doom for the human race. At the same time, we have folks like roboticist Rob Brooks, who says if you're worried about the Terminator, just keep the door closed. And of course, through the success of reinforcement learning, this robot will eventually learn to open the door, only to find out that there's a staircase behind it, and our robots struggle with staircases. Once we solve that, there's the next challenge and the next one. So the problem really isn't as immediate or as frightening as some people say. I want to remind you, which of course all of you as researchers and practitioners in machine learning know, that machine learning, even with AutoML, transfer learning, zero-shot learning, various other advances, is still 99% human work. The inputs to the learning process, the target concept, target function, the labeling of the data, the choice of algorithm or neural architecture, hyperparameter optimization, so many aspects of this are still human work, very iterative. And the key thing is inevitably we run this, we assess the output, and if we want to do better, we have to iterate and make a lot of these changes by hand. And so my conclusion and my response to those who say that AI is a danger to humanity is that AI is a tool, not a being, and it's up to us to employ this tool to benefit humanity. This is a somewhat obvious statement, I think, to most of us, but it really is important to repeat as a point of context, again, to the people around us, politicians, thinkers, and otherwise, who question what the heck we're doing here with machine learning and AI. With that in mind, the late Paul Allen founded the AIlen Institute for AI. Its mission is AI for the common good, so to use this tool to benefit humanity. And we're proud that over the last 7 years or so, we've published hundreds of papers, won 19 Best Paper Awards. We're the creators of YOLO in computer vision, Elmo, which, if you don't know, is a precursor to BERT, and also have substantial staff and funding. And of course, infomercial point, we are hiring. And one completely brand new thing in line with dealing with COVID and remote work, we now allow people to live in, say, Toronto and work at AI too. So if you're interested, send me a note, look at our website. We'd love to have you join us. In terms of projects at AI2, I can't possibly go through all of them, so I'm going to pick one, but I really just want to mention the other ones. We have an incubator that's created $500 million worth of value in its startups of various sorts. Probably the most famous is Exnor, which did computer vision at the edge and was acquired by Apple for a reported $200 million. We have projects that use data and AI for conservation, including Skylight, which fights illegal fishing, Earth Ranger, which keeps track of what's going on in national parks and natural preserves in Africa and all over the world. We have AIlen NLP, which is an open source framework. The Mosaic Projects investigates how do we endow AI systems with common sense, and even most recently looking at the question of how do we figure out computational ethics, or machine ethics more specifically. How could we build a machine with a conscience, which frankly, given the various uses that some people are putting it to, is an incredibly important and hard problem. What I'm going to talk about today, though, is the Semantic Scholar project. And that project is motivated by academic information overload. There are more than 8 million papers published each year, and scientists, even some of the most diligent, are only able to read about 200. And so this is a picture, could be a picture of my office, or perhaps a caricature of yours, where we're just inundated not only with Facebook posts, tweets, Slack messages, and so on, but also just with so many papers. And Semantic Scholar is a search engine. It's free, available 24/7 at semanticscholar.org. Uses AI techniques, machine learning techniques in particular, to cut through the clutter and home in on key papers, citations, and results. It has a huge set of features, which again, I won't go into, but let me highlight some of the key things we use to help support this ever important decision. Do I read this paper that I've heard about or not? We obviously have the abstracts, but we highlight key sentences in the abstracts with color. We automatically extract figures and tables, which is particularly handy if you're glancing at a paper to remind yourself of a result, or looking at it on a device like this one. You can quickly scroll through the figures and tables to see what's important. Often our search takes place in the citation graph, right? The hundreds of citations that a paper may receive, and then the papers that cite that paper, and so on and so on. So we filter citations to identify significant ones. We filter out self-citations when author cites themselves as less relevant. And we sort citations automatically by their importance to, again, enable you to home in on the key results. And I often find when I'm reading a paper, what I really want to know is what other papers say about it. And so we make that easily available excerpts of citations, what another paper said about mine. The most recent thing we've introduced, and this is using generative models, think of the moral equivalent of GPT-3, is TLDRs, single sentence summaries of a paper that are completely automatically generated. So if you go to Semantic Scholar search and type LSTM or open information extraction, whatever your favorite search is, searches for your favorite author, you'll see that the results have one-line summaries of the paper, which is your first line in deciding, do I want to read this paper or not? We're proud of the fact that we now cover more than 190 million papers across all academic disciplines, and we have upwards of 8 million users per month. So if you haven't tried Semantic Scholar lately, I encourage you to do so. If you're struggling to keep up with the literature, we have an adaptive feed, kind of like your Twitter or Facebook feed. In this case, it's a feed that you can train to give you the papers you're most interested in and send you email alerts when papers on that topic come out. So with this infrastructure in place, the American White House approached us in March 6th of 2020 when news about COVID was breaking, and they asked us to create a machine-readable corpus of all the available papers on COVID-19. At the time, there were very few, but also on related studies of SARS, MERS, and other scientific studies of the coronavirus. They reached out to us because we have the Semantic Scholar infrastructure. I'm incredibly proud of our team because we asked the White House, okay, when do you need this available? We were thinking 6 months, a year. They said, we need this yesterday. And within 5 days, we were able to build Cord19, which is this machine readable corpus, and launch it to the public within 10 days with help from a huge set of partners, including the National Institutes of Health, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, various preprint servers, and so on. So the Cord19 Open Research Dataset was announced to the press. It initially had 24,000 research papers. Today we have over 500,000 papers. They're updated daily. Not only is the text machine readable, but also the tables are automatically parsed and made available. And this became the basis of the most popular Kaggle competition ever, with more than 3 million views of our data and hundreds of thousands of downloads. Wide variety of institutions built systems on top of this. Let me just show you a couple of quick examples. For example, AWS, Amazon's cloud, built a question answering system where you could ask simple questions like, what are COVID-19 symptoms? Nobody seems to ask that anymore. But what are IL-6 inhibitors? Or are IL-6 inhibitors key to COVID-19? And to give you an example of an answer, here's a system for Korea where we asked what temperature kills COVID-19, and it provides the answer, 56 degrees Celsius, but also highlights the sentence this answer was in, the paragraph, and connects you to the relevant paper. So you have a clear provenance of the answer if you want to dig in. Over time, hundreds of medical papers have been written on this. Various policy decisions have been made based on information built on Cord19, and we felt good about the impact this has had to benefit humanity. We didn't just build question answering systems, also visualization systems that connect different concepts and allow people to drill down and search in a very different way. This is a system called SkySight, which also, or not SkySight, I apologize, SciSight for science. That's this system is also available on the AI2 website. We have looked at how different groups work on science. Scientists, medical researchers have told us that they want to keep track of what different groups are doing, what the affinity between them is. And again, we have a visualization of that as well. So the vision here and what we've started to do is really work to connect the AI community and the medical communities. Of course, we're not the only people doing that. There's a lot of research along those lines in bio NLP, medical NLP, and in other areas. But we feel like Cord19 has made an important contribution, particularly in this hot area of COVID. So with that, I want to talk about where we're going next, and really a vision that animates us, and we have papers on this in KDD and elsewhere, is the notion of AI-based scientific discovery. It's actually a somewhat old idea, but one that hasn't really been successful. Now that we have modern NLP techniques, based, of course, on modern machine learning techniques, we have a better chance than ever to automatically or semi-automatically read various papers, thousands of them at a time, and suggest hypotheses to scientists who can then tune the process and ultimately test these hypotheses experimentally. So Semantic Scholar is all about AI-based scientific discovery. We are very far from being the only people to do this. So we've created APIs that make our data and our software available to others. For example, if you've heard of connected papers, they use the Semantic Scholar API. And of course, we welcome those of you in the audience to join us in this effort. So with that, I want to come back to the original question. Should we fear AI? Is AI going to kill people? And I love this line from my Microsoft colleague and friend Eric Horowitz, who says, no, it's the other way around. It's the absence of AI technologies that is already killing people, right? whether it's on the roads where human drivers kill more than 40,000 people on North American highways each year. And of course, autonomous vehicle could save that, or in hospitals, where the third leading cause of death in the United States, at least, is physician error. And AI systems could work with physicians to help change that. I want to be clear that my vision of AI as a tool is the vision of augmented AI, augmented intelligence. So we're going to use AI as a tool to benefit humanity. I could tell you a lot more about projects and more about the technical details, but I'd rather stop in this point and take questions. So I'm speaking to what's interesting to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic, Oren. Thank you. One question here. Kelvin mentions, thank you, Dr. Oren, for your amazing work for COVID-19. Do you foresee Semantic Scholar opening up APIs to legal applications so underserved communities can easily find related information in the jungle that is our legal and tax code?
So I think that is a fantastic direction. That's not the direction that we've chosen because we see so much happening in science where we need help, but that doesn't mean that the infrastructure we've created can't be repurposed to that. So I'm sorry to disappoint, but I need to be frank with you and say that is not on our roadmap. But I hope somebody else will do that.
Oren, I have a question. I've noticed with research labs that are doing sort of fundamental research, and folks will sort of tap into those to explore potential applications within industry. You have a really interesting background of computer science as well as the entrepreneur side, which I think is sort of that quote unquote unicorn that everybody sort of looks for. But in the absence of that, how has the AIlen Institute sort of branched academia with industry applications and sort of kept people interested when maybe perhaps researchers fundamentally are interested in sort of sticking to the research and not necessarily the nitty gritty or the business applications or the sort of business context in which those applications might exist?
Sure. So let me, I'll give a little bit of a longer answer to this. Again, I purposefully kept my talk very short so I can address questions. I won't answer each question at such length, but I think this is a really important question for us. So the late Paul Allen wasn't an academic. He was an entrepreneur, of course, the co-founder of Microsoft, but he was completely brilliant and fascinated with these intellectual questions. But what he was fascinated with was not, can I write another paper, or even, can I write the best paper for ICML or NeurIPS? He was fascinated with impact. So our culture has always been to ask the question, this project, this piece of software, this research, this experiment, what's going to be its impact really? Not, can I get this published by a conference? And so the papers that you've seen that we've published that are all on our website or available through Semantic Scholar, these are very much means to an end. This is kind of our pulse. What we're looking for is how do we have the outsized impact on the world? And so we don't treat research, that's up here. Applied research, okay, that's something that you do. Let's let industry do that. Engineering, that's for second-class citizens. We don't think that way at all. We view researchers and applied researchers, engineers, all as peers and equals. And so projects that we do, whether it's Semantic Scholar or AIlen NLP that I mentioned, are often collaborations across these folks. And we look to impact, and often that can be achieved by an engineer in applied ways, just as well as by a scientist. And when you put the pieces together, that's when you can really perhaps do our best work. One of our mottos is the famous saying, if you want to go far, go together. So to answer your question very specifically, it's our collaborative model and the fact that baked into our culture, into our review system, everything is this notion of equality across these different classes of folks that I think helps us go beyond just writing papers.
Great response. Morteza asks, great work. Do you have any paper summarization as well on Semantic Scholar?
We have done work on paper summarization. Again, that's on our website. The TLDR, which we think of as extreme summarization, is the most notable available thing. But that's obviously one line. We are actively working on ways of summarizing the paper. It's quite tricky because, of course, a paper already has a summary, which is the human-generated abstract. So the question becomes, how does a AI generate abstract? How will it be better, right? Better than what the author themselves said. And one of the answers is we're looking at multi-paper summarization, right? Can we
Mm-hmm.
look at a summary that's based on tens or maybe even hundreds of papers? And that's obviously something that the author of an individual paper didn't do. So, great question. You can look at some of our early research results and stay tuned.
Thank you. We could just talk really briefly about something that you mentioned at the onstart of your presentation, which was sort of the fear factor. And I think with a lot of folks, they don't really realize that a lot of the most fearful applications or potential applications that we would have seen using machine learning have come to pass. For example, on Facebook, when you have sort of these very microscopic psychological profiling that went on to provide targeted political ads to cause dissent or something along those lines. Um, a lot of this could happen, and now we're sort of seeing, okay, now we want to have more transparency in the data that's being collected around privacy, around bias and explainability in models and so on. But just in terms of the data that's collected and sort of the data that's being used, how does the AIlen Institute sort of think of potential existing biases that might already exist in the data that's being used, and then the models are just perpetuating the bias that may already exist? Is that something that's thought of, or is that something that might be approached in a specific way? And if so, can you comment on that?
Yes, this is something that we think about a lot and have done research on. You mentioned bias. A paper that won Best Paper Award in EMNLP a few years back was entitled "Men Also Like Shopping." Talked about actually the bias that we see in images found on the internet. But let me take a step back and be a little bit clearer about something. When I was kind of somewhat dismissive of the fear factor about AI, I was dismissive of the catalytic vision, the apocalyptic vision of we're summoning the demon. AI is going to take over the planet. I think that fear is actually a distraction from some very real issues that we do need to face that have to do with job displacement, with AI-based weapon systems, with privacy issues, as you alluded to with Facebook, and certainly with bias. Right? These are all realistic problems that we already see. We see that in the criminal justice system when they're using AI applications in loan processing and ad targeting and facial recognition. We keep seeing evidence of this come to the fore. And so we are working on this problem, both in terms of analyzing data sets, creating better ones that have less bias, in terms of visualizing and exposing the bias that's present in the system, and in terms of working on objective functions that go beyond just what's in the data to balance bias that may be in the data with the values that we want to put forth that counteract, say, old racism and sexism and so on. We actually at AI2 in our work, we don't use, and this includes our incubator, we don't use people's personal data. So we don't have surveillance or privacy-based apps, but we are doing research to help other people fight that.
Fantastic. Sina had asked about the crossover with research, PhD research, and some open positions. Sina, what I'll do is I'll put you in touch with the team at AIlen. I think that would be of interest to them. And Jen asks, related to Mortez's question above, is there any work being done on giving accessible summaries for research papers for people outside of the field? For example, she's thinking about things like how the Cochrane reviews give up a quote plain language summary of their meta analysis. Very interesting.
Yes, that I love the questions that take us in new directions. But this is one that we've actually been working on. So again, to go back to my question, how are we going to do better than the abstract that the author wrote? And of course, the abstract the author wrote is aimed at their community. And so building and actually automatically generating more accessible summaries of papers is something that we're actively working on. I don't know that we've published any results yet, but we do view that as a key problem, and we do view NLP as able to deliver on that. We're also looking at specific ways to make papers more accessible. For example, providing definitions of terms in line, and we're working on a paper reader that could do some of what was described, provide accessible summaries, allow you to easily look up definitions of terms, to fight jargon, and so on. All this is just incredibly important because we want people, we want to support scientists in their work, but we also want to allow people to just be more informed about the scientific literature.
That's a really good point. And I think going forward, what we're most likely going to see is a lot of practitioners in the field implementing machine learning. So you won't necessarily have a machine learning practitioner or scientist, but you will have a physician who is using, or somebody that's within a specific field is using as a complement to their own work, as you had mentioned prior to. So that could be very interesting. Oren, thank you so much. I think for the sake of time, we could leave it at that. And I'm really grateful for you taking the time to share with our community. I wish you the best, and thank you so much for all the contributions. It's an honor to have you join us today.
Thank you, David. I really hope people who are interested in more of the technical details will look at the papers on our site, delve into the open source software that we have available. And personally, I'm looking forward to more talks, a lot of exciting things coming up today.
Thank you, Oren, and thanks all for joining. We'll have a small little break here, and in about 15 minutes, we'll kick off with some other sessions in the sessions tab on your left. Thank you, Oren, and thank you all. We'll see you in a bit.
Bye-bye.